The shift started at 4 p.m. The restaurant manager had assigned our team of student part-timers to the VIP banquet room, number 1, on the 20th floor. This five-star hotel, located in the heart of the city, specialized in hosting discreet meetings for the business elite. Our shift leader had meticulously briefed us on service etiquette, the sequence of courses, and the absolute necessity of silence while the clients conducted their business. Our team of 6 servers was positioned in different corners, ensuring complete coverage of the banquet table without obstructing anyone's view. The tray in my hands was laden with crystal glasses, demanding intense concentration with every step. I adjusted the lapels of my uniform vest, tied my hair back neatly, counted the glasses one last time, and moved to my position in the corner. The phone in my pocket vibrated once. A text from the chief cardiologist. The cost for Maria's heart valve replacement surgery had just increased to $150,000. Maria was the nanny who had raised me since I was a toddler, closer to me than my own flesh and blood. 3 years ago, when she fell seriously ill, my own father had heartlessly thrown her out to avoid the trouble. I defied him, taking Maria with me as I left that mansion. In response, my father immediately froze all my bank accounts. He issued a harsh ultimatum. I had 3 years to earn enough money for Maria's treatment through manual labor to prove my own merit. If I failed, I had to return obediently and submit to all his arrangements for my career and marriage. The earnings from this high-end banquet service, combined with my savings from 3 years of washing dishes and working at supermarkets, still left me short by half. Putting the phone away, I told myself I'd have to pick up 2 more night shifts next week to meet the deadline. Around 6 p.m., the grand mahogany doors of the VIP room swung open. A group of people entered, led by a young man in a black suit. Through the fawning introduction of the hotel manager, I recognized him as Liam Sterling, the CEO of a major tech corporation preparing for its stock market debut. With Liam were his CFO, his head of sales, and a few key suppliers. Across from them sat 3 foreign men representing an international investment fund headquartered in London. Tonight's dinner was pivotal. It would decide a multi-billion-dollar investment in Liam's corporation. The core terms were to be finalized right here at the dinner table before any pens touched paper. I carried a mother-of-pearl inlaid tray, circling the table to carefully pour red wine into each guest's glass. The clinking of silverware against fine china was a steady rhythm. The conversation quickly turned to finance. The fund's representative, a man named Richard, opened a thick binder and placed it on the table. He pointed a finger at the balance sheet, launching into a series of questions about capital structure, cash flow allocation, and the corporation's 5-year market share acquisition plan. A problem arose from the very first minute. Richard spoke with a thick, heavy London City accent. He swallowed his final consonants, stringing together complex macroeconomic jargon with the rapid-fire cadence typical of high finance circles. Liam's assistant, seated beside him, hastily signaled for a woman in glasses to translate. She was a temporary replacement from the company's international relations department. She clutched a notepad, scribbling furiously, her face a mask of tension. When she translated into English for Liam's team, she completely omitted crucial elements like the internal rate of return and free cash flow, lumping them together as projected profit. Liam raised a hand, signaling for her to stop. He answered himself in English, trying his best to follow Richard's questions. The disparity in pronunciation and the use of slang made the exchange disjointed. Richard shook his head, tapping his index finger on the glass tabletop. He switched topics, asking about the debt-to-equity ratio and how the corporation used derivatives to hedge against foreign currency debt when the dollar fluctuated. Once again, the translator missed the key phrase, derivative instruments, mentioning only paying back bank loans. A chill fell over the party. I took a step back to make room for a staffer clearing appetizer plates. The weight of Maria's medical bills had forced me into 10-hour days of physical labor for the past 3 years. My father's pact forbade me from touching a cent of family money. Even so, I couldn't ignore the multi-billion-dollar figures and specialized terms being grossly distorted at this table. Liam's assistant, Alex, leaned close to his ear, his urgent whisper loud enough for me to hear from a meter away. The senior financial translator the corporation had hired, specifically for this dinner, had just been in a traffic accident on the Long Island Expressway. a 3-truck pileup had brought the entire highway to a standstill. The police had closed the scene for investigation. There was no way he could make it tonight. Liam clenched the pen in his hand, his eyes sweeping over his leadership team. His entire international team consisted of just that one girl in glasses who had just repeatedly mistranslated the most basic economic concepts. I circled the long table, refilling water glasses to keep up the appearance of my duties. Liam turned to speak directly with Richard in English, trying to explain the unavoidable situation. He proposed moving the in-depth Q&A about the financial reports to a formal meeting at 8 a.m. the next day at his company's headquarters. Richard raised an eyebrow and glanced at his 2 colleagues. They immediately conferred in their characteristic London dialect, a rapid-fire mix of industry slang. The young translator across from them was completely lost, her head bowed in defeat. I retreated to the bar, using a clean cloth to polish spare crystal glasses. From their short exchange, I understood perfectly. They didn't see the translator's absence as an objective problem, but as a lack of preparation on the American side. This international fund was notoriously strict about schedules and professionalism. Failing to have a backup for a multi-billion-dollar corporate valuation negotiation was a massive black mark against the board's risk management capabilities. Richard turned back to Liam, his tone firm and cold. He stated bluntly that the fund's schedule was packed. They had a flight to Singapore at 6 a.m. the next morning to meet with another tech partner. Tonight was their only window to finalize the terms before the fund's board made its disbursement decision. If Liam's side couldn't clarify the questions about cash flow and debt right here, right now, they would put their investment decision on hold. The fund's next move would be to prioritize the portfolios of competing companies in the same region. Time ticked by, each second heavy with tension. The rhythmic tapping of Richard's finger on the glass table hammered into the minds of the corporate leadership. Every attempt at a solution was blocked by the language barrier. Business on the international stage is brutal. Companies aren't judged on effort, but on results. Not a single word of sympathy was offered for the translator's accident. The situation was at a stalemate. This contract was the lifeline Liam's corporation needed to successfully list on the stock exchange. If the investment fund pulled out, the IPO would be delayed by at least a year, triggering a cascade of consequences, from cash flow shortages to a collapse in existing shareholder confidence. Liam called his assistant Alex out into the hallway, demanding he contact every translation agency in the city to find an emergency replacement. 15 minutes passed in silence. The expensive dishes on the table grew cold. Our service team was about to clear the grilled steak plates for the next course, but the restaurant manager shook his head, signaling us to leave everything as it was. Alex pushed the door open and re-entered, his face pale. He reported that he had made 6 calls to language centers and freelance specialists, all to no avail. Mobilizing someone who was both a subject matter expert and could understand Richard's specific accent within 30 minutes was an impossible task. Richard raised his left wrist to check his mechanical watch. He smoothed the lapels of his suit and announced bluntly that the fund could only wait another 10 minutes. If no expert capable of clearly explaining the profit flow charts and the foreign currency debt management mechanisms appeared, they would end the dinner early and return to their hotel. Liam sat bolt upright in his leather chair, his hands clasped on the glass table. The deep crease between his brows betrayed the CEO's current desperation. All eyes from the American team were fixed on the main door of the banquet room. The sound of the outer glass doors echoed, and a young woman in a burgundy evening gown pushed her way into the VIP room, her strong perfume shattering the room's contained atmosphere. The woman who had just entered was named Chloe. She was the youngest daughter of the director of a hardware supply company, a long-standing partner of Liam's family. From previous business banquets I'd served at this hotel, I knew Chloe always sought any opportunity to appear by Liam's side, openly positioning herself as the corporation's future daughter-in-law. Chloe's stiletto heels clicked audibly on the thick carpet, breaking the tense silence. She had chosen a high-slit evening gown, completely inappropriate for a serious financial negotiation. She nonchalantly picked up a water glass from the table and took a sip, her attitude as relaxed as if she were at a ballroom dance. Her insensitivity to the atmosphere only highlighted her own absurdity. She walked in her sharp high heels and pulled up a chair to Liam's right. She was completely oblivious to the tension gripping the table. Chloe turned and tapped Alex's shoulder, asking quietly about the situation. Upon hearing about the translator's accident, she let out a small laugh. Chloe's gaze swept over the foreign guests, her chin held high in self-satisfaction. She turned to Liam, her voice loud enough for the whole room to hear. Chloe declared that she had studied for a master's in communications in the UK for years. Communicating with native speakers was second nature to her. She asserted that she could absolutely take on the role of translator and save the negotiation. Liam tilted his head, his hesitation palpable. He knew Chloe's actual academic credentials were in multimedia communications, completely unrelated to in-depth financial analysis. However, faced with Richard's 1-0 minute countdown, Liam had no choice but to nod, agreeing to let Chloe try. I moved to the corner of the table to pick up a napkin a guest had dropped, coincidentally ending up right behind Chloe's chair. She cleared her throat, pulled the English documents towards her, and flipped through a few pages. Chloe began to translate Richard's unfinished question about the mechanism for handling foreign currency debt and the impact of exchange rate fluctuations. Richard repeated the question in his London accent, using the terms hedging and risk margin to refer to the fund's protective strategies and investment risk tolerance. Chloe frowned upon hearing the exchange. With only a communications background, she was completely flustered by the core financial terminology. She tried to catch keywords but ended up wildly misinterpreting their substance. She turned to Liam and said in English that the International Fund was asking about the corporation using venture capital to acquire other companies and how much the operational costs for that would be. Liam's eyes widened in shock. He immediately recognized the severe misinterpretation. He pushed Chloe aside and answered himself in English, explaining that the corporation used currency swap contracts to control exchange rate risk and had absolutely no involvement in venture capital. Richard continued, asking about the expected rate of return and the weighted average cost of capital, WACC. These were core metrics the investment fund used to value the stock before committing capital. Chloe intercepted the question, deciding to answer for Liam. She fumbled through translating Liam's explanation for Richard. She completely confused cost of capital with operating costs. Worse, Chloe twisted the corporation's commitment to risk management into a promise of a fixed 20% annual return, regardless of market fluctuations. Furthermore, she stated with absolute certainty that investing in Liam's corporation would carry no risk of economic downturn. Upon hearing this, Richard's expression darkened. His colleagues simultaneously stopped writing and looked up at each other with a mixture of confusion and ridicule. In the world of international finance, a company promising a fixed, sky-high return without acknowledging associated risks is a classic sign of a fraudulent scheme or a profound lack of market awareness. A professional investment fund would never pour billions into an organization that presented such fantastical, unrealistic financial figures. Richard slammed his palm down on the glass table, the loud crack making the crystal glasses tremble. He looked directly at Liam, his voice sharp, bluntly accusing Liam's corporation of trying to conceal bad debts and using fabricated numbers to swindle the fund. The absurd promise of profit Chloe had just translated was taken as a direct insult to the intellect and expertise of London's financial analysts. Chloe panicked at the harsh reaction, stammering as she tried to explain further in English. The more she spoke, the further she strayed from the economic issues, devolving into bragging about her family's wealth to establish credibility. Richard raised a hand, waving dismissively, demanding she be quiet. He shot to his feet, buttoned his suit jacket, and signaled for his two associates to immediately pack up all their documents and laptops. The decision was made, and it was final. The investment fund was refusing to continue the negotiation, canceling all previous memorandums of understanding, and preparing to leave the room. Liam quickly stood up, circling the table in a desperate attempt to salvage the opportunity, loudly telling Chloe to sit down and not say another word. Chloe's foolish and blind desire to show off had pushed the corporation and its most important contract of the year to the brink of collapse. The restaurant manager rushed in, frantically directing the service staff. We flattened ourselves against the wall, clearing a path for the VIP guests to exit. I held a bottle of Napa Valley Cabernet, took a step back, and inadvertently found myself next to Richard's seat. Out of professional habit, I tilted the bottle at a 4-5-degree angle and poured a little more wine into his crystal glass before he departed. Silence enveloped the vast room, The hum of the air conditioning from the ceiling became starkly audible. The crystal chandelier cast its light onto the banquet table, reflecting off the glassware in dazzling, almost blinding streams. Liam's business career was teetering on the abyss, all because of a thoughtless moment from a clueless heiress. All the effort to build a professional image in the eyes of international partners had been razed to the ground. The financial reports lay scattered on the table, testaments to the leadership team's powerlessness. My ears had registered every single fundamental error that had come from Chloe's mouth. The absurdity of misinterpreting a risk-hedging contract as a multi-level marketing-style profit guarantee had utterly destroyed the situation. The reflexive thinking of someone who had once successfully defended a master's thesis in international finance at a top university suddenly resurfaced, overriding the cautious demeanor of my part-time student cover. In that silent moment, as Richard finished buttoning his suit, I unconsciously mumbled the correct terminology in English. I clearly enunciated the phrase cross-currency swap to correct the error about currency exchange and added the term risk-adjusted return instead of the blind fixed profit. The sentence structure I used was concise, adhering strictly to the standards of investment analysts, quickly explaining the risk mitigation mechanism that Liam had actually been trying to convey. My voice was very quiet, intended only for myself, a way to release the frustration of watching my field of expertise being trampled upon. But Liam was sitting less than a meter away. The hearing of someone in a state of extreme stress is incredibly sharp. He whipped his head around, his piercing gaze locking onto me. The scraping of his chair stopped abruptly. Liam's eyes scanned me from head to toe, lingering on my server's vest, the plastic name tag pinned to my chest, and the wine bottle I was still holding. Suspicion, surprise, and calculation were all plain on the young CEO's face. He had immediately recognized the difference in the precise accent and the sharp, specialized vocabulary that had just come from the mouth of a waitress. Chloe also heard my mumble. Humiliated from being berated by the partners, she instantly looked for someone to blame. Chloe slammed her hand on the table, pointing a long, manicured finger directly at my face. She began to scream at me, calling me a low-class server who didn't know her place, daring to interfere in the business of the elite. Chloe turned to the restaurant manager, demanding he fire me immediately, to throw me out of the room so I wouldn't offend the esteemed guests. The manager's face went white. He ran over, grabbed my elbow, and tried to pull me into the hallway to apologize to the guests. I stood my ground, shaking off his hand. The pressure of earning $150,000 for Maria's surgery made me realize this was a rare opportunity to change my fate. Instead of continuing to wash dishes and serve tables for dozens more months, I set the wine bottle down on the table with a firm, decisive clink. I looked directly into Chloe's eyes, my voice clear and just loud enough for everyone to hear as I exposed the problem. I pointed out her translation error. I explained clearly that turning a risk margin into a risk-free profit guarantee was considered financial fraud under international investment law. That was why the investment fund was furious and canceling the contract, not because Liam's company was weak. Chloe was speechless, her face flushing crimson. She opened her mouth to argue but couldn't find a single professional term to counter with. My analysis was too tight, hitting the very heart of the failure. Richard paused mid-stride. He turned around, his eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and scrutiny, fixed on me. He let go of his briefcase, standing still to see what would happen next. Liam saw Richard's reaction and immediately seized the golden opportunity. He raised his hand to stop Chloe, pushing her back. Liam walked to the edge of the table opposite me. In a storm of emotions, furious at the near collapse of the billion-dollar deal, disgusted by Chloe's arrogance, and astounded by the waitress's audacity, Liam managed a wry smile. He looked straight at my name tag, his voice carrying the decisiveness of a man used to giving orders. He made a proposal that stunned the entire room. He stated clearly, each word ringing out. He promised that if I could translate and save this contract, he would pay me anything I wanted. The offer, a direct financial transaction, was laid out on the banquet table, turning a service staff member into the sole lifeline for an entire tech corporation. Liam's declaration echoed in the silent banquet hall. Everyone present was stunned. Alex, the assistant, dropped his notepad onto the carpet. The department heads of the corporation stared, wide-eyed at their young CEO. Standing just behind Liam, Chloe's face shifted from crimson with anger to deathly pale. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Chloe lunged forward, grabbing Liam's arm and yanking it hard. She loudly challenged him, asking why he would entrust the fate of a multi-billion-dollar corporation to a pathetic, low-life waitress. Liam coldly shook her hand off. He didn't even glance at her, his eyes still locked on me. Liam turned and snarled at Chloe, telling her to stand still and shut her mouth. He said bluntly that her ignorant interference moments ago had pushed the corporation into a perilous situation. The restaurant manager standing next to me was also agape with astonishment. He looked nervously from Liam to me, wringing his hands, utterly lost as to how to handle the situation. On the other side of the table, Richard and his two British associates had completely stopped packing. They watched the internal conflict of the American team with curiosity. Though he didn't understand the language, Richard could clearly read the shifting expressions of everyone in the room. He raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms over his chest, and waited. The weight of Maria's $150,000 medical bill sharpened in my mind. Liam's offer was like a lucrative financial contract. He was willing to gamble money to save the lifeline contract for his corporation. I looked directly into Liam's cold, sharp eyes. The opportunity to resolve my personal financial crisis once and for all was right here on this glass table. I set my tray down on the bar, untied my black apron, and draped it over a chair. I took a step forward, facing Liam with a decisive tone. I stated my desired compensation clearly. I affirmed that as soon as the investment fund signed the agreement, Liam had to pay me $150,000 in cash, immediately, to cover the surgical expenses for my family member. Liam narrowed his eyes, assessing my confidence. A half-smile played on his lips. He nodded in immediate agreement. He asserted that my financial request was well within the corporation's ability to pay and would be met without condition. Hearing this, Chloe flew into a rage. She lunged forward, aiming to slap my face. Alex quickly stepped in, blocking her, holding her firmly by the shoulders and pulling her back. Chloe struggled relentlessly, her mouth spewing insults, calling me a swindler and an opportunist. She turned and screamed at the restaurant manager, threatening to use her family's power to shut his establishment down if he didn't throw me out immediately. The hotel manager shrank back in fear, not daring to speak. Liam instructed Alex to escort Chloe out to the hallway to ensure a quiet space for the negotiation. Chloe resisted fiercely, clinging to the back of a leather chair. She declared she would stand right there and watch how a little wine-serving nobody could possibly explain multi-billion-dollar financial reports. Liam ignored Chloe's noise, stepping back to make way for me as I approached the negotiation table. I pulled out the chair the previous translator had used and sat down. Every eye in the room was on me. My server's vest was completely out of place among the expensive designer suits. The corporation's CFO pushed a stack of color-printed reports towards me, his eyes showing a clear mix of skepticism and desperation. The head of sales wiped sweat from his brow continuously, unable to place his faith in an unknown young woman. I ignored their expressions, picked up the pen on the table, and quickly flipped through the report pages. The numbers, charts, profit margins, and cash flow allocation plans were all familiar. The knowledge from my 3 years studying for a master's in the UK allowed me to grasp the financial structure of Liam's corporation in just 2 minutes. I used the pen to circle 3 key points on the rate of return chart. I looked up, my gaze meeting Richard's directly, and spoke in precise English, adopting the same London City dialect he used. I began with an apology for the previous translation mishap. I explained briefly that the prior interpreter was not from a specialized department, which led to the confusion of core concepts. The sudden shift in my language and demeanor surprised Richard. He uncrossed his arms and pulled his chair all the way back to the table. His 2 associates exchanged glances, their interest clearly piqued. The professionalism in my pronunciation and the confidence in my communication had successfully kept the investment fund at the table. The negotiation, which had seemed utterly broken just moments before, was officially rebooted. The members of the corporation's leadership team let out a collective sigh of relief and adjusted their postures. Chloe stood in the corner, arms crossed, glaring at me with undisguised hatred. Richard reopened his thick binder to page 15. He tapped his ballpoint pen on the balance sheet, asking for a clearer explanation of the company's currently high debt-to-equity ratio. He emphasized, in his London accent, the exchange rate risk associated with borrowing in US dollars, especially with the central bank likely to raise interest rates. I listened carefully to every word, quickly synthesized the main points, and turned to Liam. I translated the question with perfect fidelity, stressing the keywords exchange rate risk and federal interest rates. Liam nodded and immediately provided an answer. He detailed their plan to use derivative instruments, specifically forward contracts, to lock in the exchange rate for foreign currency debts maturing within the next 2 years. After hearing Liam's response, I smoothly translated it back into English. I used the term forward contracts instead of the previous interpreter's convoluted phrasing. I also supplemented it with specific figures from the financial report on the table, pointing out that the risk provision costs had been fully accounted for in the third quarter's operating expenses. Richard's eyebrows shot up. He nodded, scribbling a quick note in his binder. The skepticism on the fund representative's face began to soften. Richard's colleague on the right followed up with a question about the gross profit margin in the software industry. He wondered why the research and development costs weren't amortized evenly over the years. I again translated this request accurately for Liam. Liam explained that the nature of the tech industry required heavy upfront investment to build the core platform. Once the product was complete, system maintenance costs would drop sharply, leading to a surge in gross profit margins in subsequent years. Translating this part required an understanding of the technology product lifecycle. I used the concepts of intangible assets and accelerated depreciation in English to clarify Liam's argument. I was no longer just a linguistic conduit. I proactively connected disparate data points in the report to demonstrate the project's feasibility. My coherent explanations, combined with a confident demeanor, won over the entire foreign delegation. They fired off a series of difficult questions, drilling down into free cash flow and market acquisition plans. I handled each one flawlessly, without a single stumble. The corporation's CFO sitting beside me was dumbfounded. He took off his glasses, wiped them with a handkerchief, and muttered praise for my abilities. The head of sales nodded continuously, his face beaming with joy. Liam maintained a calm facade, but the way he looked at me had completely changed. Initial surprise had transformed into admiration and respect. He answered the partner's questions more fluently, without the hesitation he'd shown at the beginning of the dinner. The seamless synergy between the CEO and the waitress breathed new life into the negotiation. The barriers of language and business culture were completely shattered. Chloe stood pressed against the corner wall, watching the scene unfold in disbelief. She strained to listen, but her limited vocabulary didn't allow her to comprehend the discussion. The macroeconomic terms flew over her head like an alien language. Seeing the satisfied nods of the international guests, Chloe bit her lower lip until it bled. Her fake nails dug into the plaster wall. Her plan to show off and assert herself had utterly collapsed. More importantly, the one who had delivered this crushing defeat was the very low-class waitress she had just loudly berated. Envy and rage swelled within her, making her gasp for air. She glanced at my tray of wineglasses on the bar, a malicious idea flickering in her eyes. The wall clock struck 8:30 p.m. Richard posed the final question about the pre-IPO stock valuation. I translated it quickly for Liam. Liam gave his target figure, backing it with solid asset guarantees. I delivered the final translation, concluding the entire negotiation with a concise summary of the investment strategy. After hearing it, Richard snapped his binder shut. The sound echoed through the room. The atmosphere went still, everyone holding their breath, awaiting the final decision from the fund's representative. Richard pushed his chair back, stood up, and walked around the table directly toward Liam. He extended his right hand, a broad smile spreading across his face. The gesture was more eloquent than any declaration. The International Investment Fund had officially agreed to disburse billions of dollars to Liam's corporation. Liam shot to his feet, clasping Richard's hand firmly. The two men shook hands with a decisive force that signified a successful partnership. The department heads of the corporation rose in unison and applauded. The sound of clapping filled the room, breaking the oppressive tension that had lingered for the past 2 hours. The CFO laughed heartily, slapping the head of sales on the back. Alex rushed out into the hallway, making a call to relay the good news to the board members waiting at home. I let out a sigh of relief and slowly stood up from my chair. The successful deal meant that Maria's $150,000 for her surgery was secured. I gathered the documents on the table, stacking them neatly in front of Liam's seat. Richard turned to look at me, his eyes filled with admiration. He praised my translation skills and sharp analytical thinking directly in English. He admitted that without my timely intervention, the fund would have missed out on a promising partner in the American market. I bowed my head and thanked him politely, maintaining a modest and professional demeanor. Liam stood beside me, carefully observing my conduct. He signaled for his CFO to open his briefcase and take out the Memorandum of Understanding, already drafted in 2 languages. The document stipulated the core terms regarding equity ownership, investor veto rights, and the quarterly disbursement schedule. The CFO placed the contract on the glass table, initialing each page with a Parker fountain pen before passing it to Liam. Richard and Liam sat down together. They skimmed the terms one last time to ensure all verbal agreements had been fully recorded in writing. The rustling of paper was a steady, promising sound. Chloe remained frozen in the corner, her hateful gaze fixed on the contract. She stealthily began to inch toward a service cart parked near the exit. Taking advantage of the moment when everyone's attention was on the signing ceremony, Chloe slipped the large diamond ring off her ring finger. She pretended to drop her handbag, bent down to pick it up, and swiftly dropped the ring into a pile of dirty tablecloths on the cart. The action was lightning fast. Chloe stood up, smoothed her dress, and continued to watch the proceedings with a sinister smirk on her face. Liam signed his name on the final page of the contract. He pushed the paper over to Richard. The fund representative decisively signed and affixed the fund's corporate seal. The 2 copies of the contract were exchanged. The signing was complete. Alex entered with a bottle of champagne, popping the cork with a celebratory bang as white foam overflowed. The restaurant manager quickly directed the service staff to bring glasses for a toast. I took a step back, giving the corporate leadership and their partners space to celebrate. My role in this negotiation was over. I retrieved my apron from the chair, tied it back around my waist, and returned to my station at the bar. The atmosphere in the VIP room became jubilant. Richard raised his champagne flute, toasting to the project's smooth start. Liam clinked glasses in return, repeatedly thanking his new partners. The cold food on the table was quickly cleared away by the service staff, replaced by platters of fresh fruit and dessert pastries. After 15 minutes of toasts and small talk, Richard's team excused themselves to prepare for their early morning flight. Liam and his directors personally escorted their partners to the elevator. The banquet room was left with just a few cleaning staff, the hotel manager, Alex, and Chloe. I picked up a plastic tray and began collecting the used wine glasses, carefully arranging them on the cart. My job now was to finish my shift and wait to discuss my payment with Liam. The restaurant manager wiped sweat from his forehead and walked over, patting my shoulder. He spoke in a flustered tone, thanking me for saving the hotel's reputation while also apologizing for his harsh attitude earlier. I smiled and nodded, indicating I didn't mind. For me, baseless scolding was something I had grown all too familiar with in the service industry over the past 3 years. I continued to wipe up spilled wine from the glass tabletop. Alex walked back into the room holding his notepad. He approached me and said in a low voice, "CEO Liam Sterling asks that you wait in the employee lounge after your shift to settle the agreement." I replied with a confirmatory nod. Everything was proceeding as expected. The crushing weight of the medical bills was finally being lifted. I continued to gather the dirty porcelain plates, stacking them neatly on the lower tier of the service cart. Suddenly, Chloe stepped out from the corner into the middle of the room. She stomped her high heel onto the carpeted floor, the loud thud grabbing everyone's attention. Chloe held her right hand up in front of her face, feigning panic as she looked around, and began to shriek that her diamond ring, worth $500,000, had vanished. Chloe deliberately raised her voice to its highest pitch, causing the other servers to stop their work. The hotel manager, who had just stepped out, rushed back in. He ran to Chloe, his face tense, asking her to explain what happened. Chloe stated with absolute certainty that she had taken the ring off and placed it on the glass table while on the phone, and when she looked again, it was gone. Chloe's eyes darted around the room, her gaze landing on me. She pointed her finger straight at my face and loudly accused, "You are the thief." Chloe argued that I was the only person who had been clearing that area of the table, and furthermore, my poor circumstances provided the perfect motive for the crime. Chloe's words were dripping with insult and contempt. She called me a filthy thief who took advantage of the chaos to make a move. The hotel manager turned pale, sweat pouring down his face. The reputation of a five-star hotel could not tolerate an employee stealing from a VIP guest. He hurried towards me, demanding I stop what I was doing and step away from the cart. He ordered 2 male servers to block the door, preventing anyone from leaving. The manager turned back to Chloe, obsequiously wringing his hands, apologizing and promising to get to the bottom of it. He approached me and, in a low voice, demanded I voluntarily hand over the ring to resolve the matter quietly. He threatened that if I was stubborn, the hotel would be forced to search my person and belongings. I stood my ground, my arms crossed. Chloe's blatant fabrication didn't frighten me. 3 years of navigating the harsh realities of the world had taught me how to handle dirty tricks. I looked the manager directly in the eye, my voice firm and cold. I denied all accusations and strictly forbade him from touching me or my personal property. I declared that an unauthorized search was a serious violation of the law and that I would sue the hotel if they dared to proceed. Hearing this, Chloe pressed her advantage. She strode to the service cart and began rummaging through the pile of dirty tablecloths herself. After just 3 seconds, Chloe pulled out the sparkling diamond ring, holding it high for everyone to see. She smirked, looking at me triumphantly. Chloe turned to the manager, demanding he call the police immediately to arrest me for grand larceny. The hotel manager sighed in relief at finding the item, but was immediately flustered by the demand to call the police. If the incident became public, the hotel's reputation would be severely damaged. He advised Chloe to handle it internally by firing me. Chloe adamantly refused. She wanted to see me in jail as revenge for her earlier humiliation. She pulled her phone from her purse and dialed the number for the local police precinct. I remained calm. I took a step forward and requested that the hotel manager secure the service cart as a crime scene. I explained clearly that the ring would only have Chloe's fingerprints on it, not mine. More importantly, VIP room number 1 was equipped with a high-definition security camera system, with cameras in all 4 corners of the ceiling. I loudly demanded that the manager immediately review the camera footage to see who had placed the ring on the cart. At the word camera, Chloe's face drained of color. She froze, the hand holding the phone trembling. Chloe hastily argued that the cameras might have blind spots and couldn't be used as evidence. She screamed for the police to make an arrest immediately, based on the physical evidence that had been found. Just then, the door to the VIP room flew open. Liam entered, followed by Alex. He had just seen his guests to their car and returned upon hearing the commotion. Liam's eyes swept the room, quickly assessing the situation. He walked to the center of the room, his authoritative voice rising above Chloe's shrieks. Liam gave a direct order to the hotel manager. Summon the head of security to the control room. Pull the camera footage from the last 15 minutes and project it directly onto the screen in the banquet hall. Liam's decisive command terrified Chloe. She stumbled backward, her heel catching on a chair leg, nearly falling. Her clumsy charade was about to be exposed in front of the very man she was always trying to impress. The hotel manager nodded hastily in compliance, using his walkie-talkie to call the security office. Less than 2 minutes later, the hotel's head of security entered with a large tablet. He connected it to the projector on the wall, and the room lights dimmed. The crystal-clear video from the camera in the room's right corner began to play. Every one of Chloe's stealthy actions, removing the ring, faking the dropped purse, and the quick motion of tossing the ring onto the cart was displayed in plain sight. There were no blind spots. The noise in the room died instantly. The evidence was irrefutable. The hotel manager turned to Chloe with a look of anger and contempt. Her fabricated theft accusation had nearly implicated the entire hotel. Chloe stood rooted to the spot, her face ashen. She rushed forward, grabbing the sleeve of Liam's suit jacket, and began to sob, pleading. Chloe claimed she was just trying to play a little joke on me and never expected things to go so far. Liam coldly and decisively shook her hand off, his brow furrowed in utter disgust. Liam told her to her face that trying to frame someone and send them to prison was not a joke. He declared he would send this video to the director of her father's company, Chloe's own father, so he could see for himself how he had raised his daughter. Chloe completely broke down, slumping into the nearest chair and burying her face in her hands, sobbing. The arrogance and entitlement of the wealthy heiress had been utterly shattered by the ironclad evidence. The video on the projector screen ended, returning the VIP room to a tense silence, punctuated only by Chloe's choked sobs and the resentful glares of the hotel staff. The manager wiped his brow, approached Liam, and bowed his head, apologizing for the unfortunate incident. He offered to call security to escort Chloe out to avoid any further disturbance. Hearing this, Chloe's head snapped up. She hastily wiped away her tears, smearing her makeup. She clung to the edge of the glass table and loudly tried to justify her actions. Chloe looked directly at Liam, claiming she did it because she loved him so much and couldn't bear to see some low-class waitress use verbal tricks to capture his attention. She emphasized that their families had been discussing marriage for a long time, and that she had every right to eliminate any rival who stood in her way. Liam adjusted the button on his suit jacket, his gaze on Chloe sharp and cold. He took a step forward, maintaining a precise arm's-length distance from her. In a low, deliberate voice, Liam articulated every word, stating that there had never been any marriage agreement between them. The business partnership between their two companies was a straightforward, valuable financial exchange, completely unrelated to personal feelings. Liam reiterated the severe consequences of Chloe's earlier mistranslation of the financial report. He stressed that her incompetence and arrogant attitude had nearly destroyed a multi-billion-dollar contract, directly threatening the corporation's survival. A woman willing to sacrifice corporate interests to satisfy her baseless jealousy would never have the right to enter his family. Each of Liam's words landed like a hammer blow. Chloe was speechless, her entire body trembling. She turned to look at me, her eyes still filled with unconcealed hostility. She pointed at me, demanding to know why Liam was defending someone with no background, a destitute commoner. At that very moment, Liam turned, walked over to the service cart where I stood, and reached out his right hand. He grasped my wrist firmly and pulled me out from the corner, bringing me to stand beside him, as his equal. His grip was strong but not rough. He turned to face Chloe, Alex, and everyone else in the room. Liam announced loudly, his voice ringing with conviction, that this woman in the server's vest was not an ordinary employee, but his girlfriend. The words exploded in the room, delivered without a hint of hesitation or doubt. Liam fabricated a perfect cover story on the spot. He explained, "She deliberately took a part-time job at this hotel to secretly support me during this crucial negotiation, just in case our partners tried to corner us with technical jargon. Her stepping in to correct the translation earlier was entirely part of a pre-arranged plan between the two of us." Liam's declaration was like a bombshell. Alex's eyes widened in astonishment, the notepad in his hand almost slipping to the floor for a second time. The hotel manager took a step back, covering his mouth, unable to believe his ears. I stood silently beside Liam, maintaining maximum composure. My wrist was still held fast in his grip, and my instincts told me not to pull away or deny it. I quickly analyzed the situation. Liam's lie served two core purposes. First, it protected me from Chloe's vindictive schemes. Second, it decisively cut off any hopes of a forced marriage from her family. Acknowledging me as his girlfriend legitimized my intervention in the negotiation, transforming me from an outsider into someone with a rightful place at the table. Seeing the immense strategic benefit behind this lie, I chose to cooperate. I gave a slight nod, looking directly at Chloe to confirm the story. Chloe was utterly devastated. Her legs gave way beneath her high heels. She staggered back, leaning against the glass table, gasping for breath. All her arguments were rendered meaningless by the new identity Liam had just given me. This shock was more than the pampered heiress, who always saw herself as the center of the universe, could bear. Chloe couldn't say another word. She bowed her head, grabbed her designer handbag, and ran out of the VIP room. The sound of her heels faded down the hallway. The hotel manager immediately directed his staff to clean up the scene, remove the projector, and take away the service cart. He bowed respectfully to Liam before quietly retreating with his service team, leaving the CEO and his girlfriend their privacy. The mahogany door closed, leaving just me, Liam, and Alex in the vast room. The moment the door shut, I decisively pulled my hand from Liam's grasp. I took 2 steps back, re-establishing a professional distance, and motioned for Alex to wait outside. Alex quickly complied, stepping out and closing the door carefully behind him. Alone in the room, Liam's demeanor changed instantly. The protective boyfriend persona vanished, replaced by the sharp, negotiating stance of a businessman. He pulled out the chair at the head of the table, sat down, and pointed to the one opposite, indicating I should sit to discuss business. I removed my uniform apron, placed it on the table, and sat down directly across from him, awaiting his specific proposal. Liam got straight to the point. He made a clear offer. He wanted to hire me to play the role of his girlfriend, or if necessary, his fiancée, for a term of exactly 1 year. The purpose of this contract was to create a solid shield against the marriage pressure from his own mother and Chloe's family. Liam briefly analyzed his internal situation. The corporation was in a sensitive pre-IPO phase. He needed to devote 100% of his focus to financial strategy, with no time to deal with family merger schemes or irrational jealousy scenes like tonight's. He praised my language skills, economic knowledge, and composure under pressure. He believed I was intelligent enough to play this role perfectly without causing any trouble. After hearing the basic terms, I laid out my own conditions. I stated that pretending to be the girlfriend of a well-known CEO would entail significant risks to my personal image and time. I demanded an immediate wire transfer of $500,000. This figure included the $150,000 previously agreed upon for Maria's heart valve surgery, plus an additional $350,000 as an advance to cover the expenses that would arise from stepping into the world of the elite. I made it clear that I would not accept installment payments or future promises. The transaction had to be completed tonight, before I signed any paperwork. Liam narrowed his eyes, showing no surprise at my straightforwardness. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times on his banking app. A few seconds later, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text notification confirmed a deposit of exactly $500,000. With the money received, I nodded my agreement. Liam took a pen and paper from Alex's briefcase, which had been left on the table, and quickly outlined the 3 core principles of our cohabitation contract. First, I had to move into his luxury penthouse apartment immediately to maintain appearances for his family. Second, we were to have absolutely no interference in each other's personal lives or real work when a third party wasn't present. Third, I had to accompany him to family events and corporate parties upon request. I scanned the paper and signed my name at the bottom. The handwritten contract was effective immediately. Liam stood up, buttoned his jacket, and informed me that Alex would bring a car to pick me up in the morning. Leaving the hotel at 11 p.m., I hailed a cab and went straight to the city's cardiac hospital. Walking into the intensive care unit, the smell of antiseptic hit me. I went to the night shift cashier, transferred the full $150,000 as a deposit for the medical fees. Holding the red receipt, I found Dr. Evans, the head of the night shift. I informed him that the payment was complete and requested they schedule Maria's heart valve replacement surgery as soon as possible. Dr. Evans checked her medical records on the computer, confirmed the payment, and scheduled the surgery for next Thursday morning. Everything proceeded smoothly. I stood looking through the glass window of her room, seeing Maria sleeping peacefully, aided by a ventilator. The burden I had carried for 3 long years was officially lifted. The next morning, a black SUV pulled up in front of my run-down apartment building. Alex stepped out, dressed in an impeccable suit, and took my single canvas suitcase, placing it in the trunk. I returned the room key to my landlady and got into the car. The vehicle navigated through narrow streets, heading toward the most expensive residential area in the southern part of the city. A private elevator took me straight to the top floor of the tower. The doors opened to reveal a penthouse apartment spanning over 3,000 square feet. Liam was sitting on the living room sofa, reading financial news on a tablet. Seeing me, he gestured with his chin toward the hallway on the right. He informed me I would be using the guest bedroom at the end of the hall, which was a fully equipped suite. He gave me a key card and the code to a secondary safe. Our contracted life under one roof had officially begun. Life in the penthouse followed the strict rules of our agreement. Liam and I rarely saw each other in the morning due to our completely different work schedules. This peace, however, lasted only 3 days. On Friday morning, Alex brought me a gold-rimmed invitation. Eleanor Sterling, Liam's mother, requested my presence at a French restaurant in the historic district. This was the first test from the family, one Liam had warned me about. Eleanor was known in business circles as a meticulous woman who held strong beliefs about social standing and marrying within one's class. Liam's sudden announcement of a girlfriend who was a waitress instead of an heiress, like Chloe, had certainly infuriated her. I chose a simple, elegant beige business dress, styled my hair in a low bun, and wore light makeup for the meeting. The French restaurant was quiet at noon. Eleanor sat at a central table, wearing a silk dress and a large string of pearls. Liam was already there, seated across from his mother. When he saw me approach, he immediately stood to pull out a chair for me next to him. He wrapped an arm lightly around my waist, looked at his mother, and introduced me with a deliberately gentle and affectionate tone, reinforcing our lover facade. Eleanor did not return my greeting. Her sharp eyes scanned me from head to toe, pausing on my non-designer handbag. She pushed a French menu towards me and told me to order for myself. This was a basic test. I opened the menu and spoke directly to the waiter in fluent French. I ordered a traditional French onion soup for an appetizer, duck confit with an orange reduction for the main course, and requested a glass of Bordeaux to accompany it. My perfect pronunciation made Eleanor pause. She retracted her hand, took a sip of water, and changed her line of attack. She went straight to the point, criticizing my poor background as unworthy of her family. She presented a course registration form, announcing she had enrolled me in a high society etiquette and fine dining class taught by a foreign expert. Eleanor stated bluntly, "If you cannot pass this course within 1 week, you are to leave Liam on your own accord." Her intention was clear: to use the complexities of aristocratic rules to intimidate a girl she thought was just a part-time student, forcing me to give up out of shame and insecurity. I calmly took the paper, folded it, and put it in my bag. I smiled and agreed to her challenge, my tone showing no fear or offense. With my 3 years of study in the UK and the strict upbringing from my own family, I knew I was more than capable of handling these superficial tests. The next afternoon, I arrived at the exclusive private club for the first lesson. The instructor was Madame Dubois, a famously strict French expatriate. The first test was setting a 9-course formal dinner table. Madame Dubois instructed me to rearrange the entire set of silverware, which had been placed incorrectly. I approached the table and worked quickly. I placed the oyster fork on the outermost right side, adjusted the butter knife's position on the bread plate to the upper left, and set the correct glasses for white wine, red wine, and champagne in order of height. Madame Dubois stood with her arms crossed, observing, unable to find a single flaw. She nodded and moved on to the second test: posture, walking, and exiting a car. I wore the 4-inch heels provided by the center and balanced a thick book on my head. I walked along a chalk line on the red carpet. Each step was perfectly placed, the ball of my foot touching down first, my hips steady, shoulders back, and my spine perfectly straight. The book on my head didn't move a single centimeter. Next was exiting a car. I kept my knees together, swiveled at the hips to bring both legs out of the car at once, placed the balls of my feet on the ground, and then used my core strength to stand. The entire movement was fluid and elegant, with no awkwardness. Madame Dubois continuously took notes on her evaluation sheet. Her eyebrows relaxed, revealing surprise at her student's flawless foundation. The final test was dinner party conversation. Madame Dubois played the role of a foreign dignitary's wife, initiating a conversation in English about European Renaissance art. She deliberately used difficult, specialized art history vocabulary to challenge me. I responded calmly. I analyzed the differences in brushwork between Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo in their depiction of human anatomy. My words were articulate, my grammatical structures complex, and my conversational style was confident, maintaining direct eye contact. At the end of the 3-hour session, Madame Dubois closed her evaluation book. She immediately called Eleanor Sterling, right there in the classroom, her voice filled with admiration. She reported that this student required no further instruction. "These rules," she said, "seem to have been ingrained in me long ago." On the other end of the line, Eleanor was silent for a few seconds before hanging up. Her plan to humiliate me with high society etiquette had completely backfired. Having passed Eleanor's test, my existence in the penthouse was temporarily peaceful. However, Liam decided that my staying at home would arouse suspicion. To legitimize our relationship, he decided to bring me into the corporate headquarters as a project assistant. On Monday morning, I wore a black business suit and carried a briefcase, taking the private elevator with Liam up to the 15th floor. The sight of the CEO emerging from his private elevator with a young woman immediately drew the attention of the entire administrative staff. Whispers erupted from cubicles across the floor. Everyone had heard the rumors about the incident at the hotel, and now, seeing me openly arriving with the big boss, their curiosity piqued. I ignored all the stares, walked straight to the desk arranged just outside the CEO's office, turned on the computer, and began reading the project documents. The job of a project assistant required synthesizing vast amounts of data from various departments. Liam assigned me the entire file for the launch campaign of a new AI-integrated sales management software for retail chains. This was the corporation's flagship product for the quarter, directly impacting revenue streams. Skimming through the marketing plan submitted by the marketing director, I quickly identified a major flaw. The plan was overly focused on traditional television and print advertising. It was wasting the budget on audiences with no actual need for the product. At 10 a.m., Liam convened an extended board meeting to finalize the implementation plan. I followed him into the glass-walled conference room with a stack of documents, choosing an empty seat at the corner of the table to take notes. The marketing director, a middle-aged man, stood before the projector screen presenting the campaign. He spoke at length about blanketing the brand across mass media channels, proposing a budget of $5 million. The board members frowned. The CFO shook his head, pointing out that spending such a large sum without being able to assess the customer conversion rate was far too risky. The atmosphere in the meeting grew tense. The marketing director broke into a sweat, trying to justify his plan with vague estimates of brand recognition. Liam sat at the head of the table, tapping his pen on the glass, his face showing clear disappointment. The project was stalled at the market entry phase. Seeing an opportunity to demonstrate my real capabilities rather than just being a decorative accessory, I carefully noted all the plan's weaknesses in my notebook. Aware of my position as a new assistant, I knew that directly challenging a department head in a meeting would violate corporate hierarchy. After the meeting, I returned to my desk, opened my laptop, and drafted a concise 2-page report. The report clearly analyzed that the target audience for this software was retail business owners, not the general public. Advertising on national television was a pointless waste of resources. I recommended a complete strategic shift to a B2B model, implementing a free trial approach. Instead of pouring money into broadcast ads, the corporation should use that budget to sponsor the system for 5 mid-sized supermarket chains for a 6-month period. I attached a chart calculating the customer acquisition cost and customer lifetime value, proving that the return on investment would double. I knocked on the door of Liam's office and placed the report on his oak desk. Liam frowned and picked up the paper. His eyes scanned the data, pausing at the customer conversion funnel chart. The frustration on his face gradually faded, replaced by surprise and admiration. My logical analysis, which went straight to the cash flow weaknesses, had completely convinced the CEO. Liam looked up at me and put the report down. He immediately picked up the internal phone and called the marketing director to his office. Liam handed my report directly to him, ordering the marketing department to scrap the old strategy and implement the free trial approach starting next week. The director read through the paper, nodding repeatedly, completely won over by the sharp arguments of the anonymous report writer. That very afternoon, Liam signed an internal memo appointing me as deputy project manager, with direct responsibility for overseeing the software trial phase. 3 weeks after the strategy meeting, the corporation received an invitation to the annual charity auction gala hosted by the city's real estate association. Liam asked me to accompany him as both deputy project manager and official girlfriend to expand our network. The event was held in the grand ballroom of an international conference center. The guests were all prominent business owners, investors, and influential politicians. I chose a simple, elegantly cut black evening gown. I walked with Liam through security and into the exhibition area. The ballroom was bathed in warm, artistic lighting, illuminating dozens of paintings and sculptures awaiting auction. Guests mingled, exchanging business cards and discussing potential partnerships over glasses of champagne. Just as we arrived at table number 3, Chloe appeared. She was wearing a sparkling sequined gown, accompanied by a group of friends, all wealthy heiresses. Chloe's eyes darted towards me, her hostile attitude undiminished since the hotel incident. Chloe deliberately walked past me, raising her wine glass, and made a sarcastic comment about how someone from the serving class had managed to claw her way into high society. I ignored her provocations, focusing instead on the auction catalog on the table. A total of 15 items were up for sale tonight. All proceeds would go directly to a fund for building schools in underprivileged areas. Seeing Chloe staring, Liam took a step back and wrapped his arms snugly around my waist. He leaned in close to my ear, and in a voice loud enough for Chloe to hear, offered to buy me one of the auctioned paintings as a gift. I smiled, nodded, and replied sweetly, playing my part in our lover's script perfectly for our antagonist's benefit. Around 8 p.m., the auction officially began. A famous MC skillfully orchestrated the lively bidding. The first 14 items sold successfully one after another. The final item brought to the stage was a large, abstract oil painting. The artist was a contemporary French-American painter of growing fame in Europe. Suddenly, the MC stopped reading from his script. He looked down at the Vanderbilt family's table and nodded, receiving a subtle signal. The MC raised the microphone and announced that, to add some excitement to the night's most valuable item, the organizers would like to invite me to the stage to personally introduce the artistic value of the painting. The spotlight immediately swung to my seat. The entire hall turned to look at table 3. Chloe smiled smugly, whispering to her friends. This sudden move was clearly a deliberate setup. Abstract art is notoriously difficult to analyze for those without a specialized art history background. Chloe wanted to force me into making foolish comments, thereby embarrassing Liam and proving my low-class origins in front of hundreds of powerful business figures. Liam frowned, about to stand up and decline the invitation on my behalf. He understood the risk of speaking out of turn at such a high-profile event. I placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, signaling for him to stay seated. I stood up and calmly walked up the red-carpeted stairs. Taking the microphone from the MC, I turned to face the oil painting. It consisted of chaotic, overlapping patches of gray, black, and deep red, with no discernible form. I studied the brushstrokes for a few seconds, searching my memory of the art history electives I had taken in college. Turning back to the audience, I began my presentation. I avoided generic, effusive praise. I pointed directly to the impasto technique the artist used to create texture. I analyzed the use of a cool-toned background with crimson accents to represent the internal conflict of humanity in the digital age. To accommodate the large number of international guests, I switched to speaking English. I connected the painting's value to the current trend of investing in contemporary art, citing auction data from Sotheby's from the past quarter to demonstrate the work's potential for appreciation. My voice was clear, my sentence structure was impeccable, and I seamlessly wove together specialized vocabulary from both art history and finance. The entire hall listened in rapt silence. The foreign investors nodded, taking notes. The moment I finished speaking and stepped down from the stage, hands shot up to bid. The starting price of $200,000 was quickly driven up to $500,000, shattering the records of all previous items. The painting was finally sold to a Singaporean tycoon. Chloe stood in the audience, her face flushed with rage. Her plan to humiliate me had failed spectacularly. In a fit of anger, she slammed her wine glass on the table, turned, and stormed out of the event. The retail management software project entered its trial phase. The workload at the corporate office doubled. I was directly overseeing the system implementation for the 5 partner supermarket chains, dealing with a constant stream of technical glitches from end users. Every day, I had to analyze dozens of customer behavior data reports and tweak the software interface for optimization. At the same time, Maria had just undergone her heart valve surgery. Although the operation was a success, her recovery required intensive monitoring, and the cost of specialized care was too high for me to hire a private nurse. After my long hours at the company, I would rush to the hospital by taxi, taking turns to watch over her ventilator and help feed her through a tube. This grueling schedule, which lasted for 2 weeks, pushed my body to its limit. On a Friday night at 8 p.m., I was the only one left in the deputy project manager's office. I was trying to finish the customer conversion rate report for the next morning's briefing. The numbers on the computer screen started to blur. Exhaustion and sleep deprivation washed over me. I rested my head on the stack of documents on my desk and drifted off. A knock on the door startled me awake. Liam entered, holding 2 cups of black coffee. He glanced at the clock, noted that it was long past working hours, and told me to stop. He placed a coffee on my desk and pulled up a chair. He pointed out the dark circles under my eyes and demanded to know why a key project manager was allowing herself to become so run down, affecting the team's overall productivity. I took a sip of coffee and didn't hide my situation. I briefly explained that I had been spending my nights at the hospital caring for Maria. Hearing this, the crease between Liam's brows deepened. He said nothing more, stood up, and told me to pack my things and come to the car immediately. The SUV headed straight for the city's cardiac hospital instead of back to the penthouse. During the drive, Liam was constantly on the phone. He spoke in English, discussing complex medical terms about post-op anti-infection protocols with someone on the other end. I sat in the passenger seat, leaning my head against the window, too tired to even wonder about his calls. At the hospital entrance, I headed straight for inpatient room number 5. But Maria's bed was empty. A doctor passing by informed me that the patient had just been moved to the VIP care wing on the 8th floor. I rushed to the elevator. The doors of VIP suite number 1 opened to a spacious, immaculate room that looked more like a 5-star hotel. It was fully equipped with the latest generation of cardiac monitoring devices. 2 professional nurses in crisp white uniforms were attending to Maria, gently adjusting her IV drip. Liam was standing by the window, speaking directly with Dr. Evans. He was finalizing a comprehensive 24/7 care package, instructing the hospital to use the best antibiotics available, regardless of the cost. His assistant, Alex, had already settled the entire bill half an hour ago. I stood frozen in the doorway, stunned by this sudden turn of events. Liam finished his conversation with the doctor and turned to me. He walked over, his tone still retaining the decisiveness of a businessman. He explained that his actions were merely an investment to maintain the work performance of his deputy project manager, ensuring I was healthy enough to contribute to the upcoming software launch. His logic was impeccable, completely devoid of personal sentiment. However, the thoughtfulness in his choice of medical equipment and the fact that he had come personally to inspect the room went far beyond the boundaries of a typical fake girlfriend contract. I nodded and said a clear thank you. The relationship between us was beginning to shift beyond the transactional agreements on paper. The real care, replacing the facade, was creating a more solid bond in our shared life. The trial data from the freemium model began to show positive results. 3 out of the 5 supermarket chains decided to sign long-term licensing contracts for the software. The corporation held a small celebration at the headquarters. That evening, I brought a stack of legal documents home to review the information security clauses before sending them to accounting for invoicing. Our workspace in the penthouse was divided into 2 areas. Liam used a large oak desk, while I worked at a smaller glass table near the window. I needed to print some reference documents urgently. Just as I hit print, my desk phone rang. A specialist from the hospital was calling with details about Maria's heart rhythm chart from the past 24 hours. I quickly grabbed the phone and stepped out onto the balcony to discuss the medical data privately. While I was on the phone, the printer jammed. Liam, who was reading a financial report at his desk, heard the continuous beeping and got up to check. He opened the printer lid and pulled out the jammed sheet. Mixed in with the misprinted project files was a clear plastic sleeve containing my personal documents. I had taken them to HR that morning to complete my official appointment paperwork, but had forgotten to put them back in the safe. Liam pulled out the stack of papers. The first was the final transcript from my master's program at the Wharton School of Business. The second was a diploma with highest honors from Phillips Exeter Academy, one of the most expensive and prestigious boarding schools in the country, where annual tuition ran into the tens of thousands of dollars. Liam flipped through the documents, his eyes growing sharper. The official seals and headmasters' signatures from these elite institutions completely contradicted the story of an orphan girl who had to wash dishes to survive. The combination of a top-tier education and her current impoverished circumstances was a logical black hole, unexplainable by ordinary tales of hard work. I pushed the balcony door open just in time to see Liam staring at the transcript in his hand. Realizing my carelessness, I quickly approached the printer, reaching for the documents. Liam didn't hand them over immediately. He placed the stack on the printer's glass top and tapped his finger on the Exeter logo. He asked a direct question, demanding an explanation for the source of the enormous funds required for 6 years of study at the UK and US's most exclusive institutions for the super-rich. In a steely voice, he quickly listed the average tuition and living costs in Philadelphia and London, pointing out the absurdity of a part-time student being able to afford it. The skepticism of a CEO accustomed to risk analysis was on full display. He needed to know the exact background of the person holding a key position in his corporation's flagship project. I calmly retrieved the documents and carefully placed them back in the plastic sleeve. Meeting his gaze without flinching, I gave him the answer I had prepared 3 years ago. I claimed that my entire education had been funded by a full-ride private scholarship. The fund, I explained, was managed by an anonymous philanthropist who sponsored students with perfect scores in international math Olympiads. Technically, this wasn't a lie. That fund was an educational trust set up by my own father. I just omitted the identity of the person behind it. I added that after graduating, I refused an arranged position with the sponsor, and was subsequently cut off from all financial support, leading to my current situation. Liam listened silently to the entire explanation, his arms crossed. Although the private scholarship story plugged the financial holes, his intuition told him something was still being concealed. However, respecting the non-interference clause of our contract, he decided to drop it. He nodded, told me to put the documents away securely, and returned to his desk. The secret of my identity as the heiress to a financial empire remained safe, for now. The 3-year deadline to prove myself to my father was less than 2 months away. I had to hold my position through my own abilities, without resorting to my family's power. The corporation's calm was shattered on Monday morning. At 8 a.m., the head of the manufacturing department burst into the CEO's office. He reported that Vanderbilt Hardware Solutions, the company run by Chloe's father, had abruptly terminated their supply contract. The entire shipment of data storage servers, scheduled for installation in 3 new supermarket chains this week, was being held at their warehouse. Worse, Vanderbilt was demanding immediate payment of a $20 million debt that was still within its grace period, citing concerns about our ability to pay. This supply chain disruption struck at the very heart of our software deployment strategy, threatening to halt the project indefinitely. But it didn't stop there. At 10 a.m., a slew of tech journals simultaneously published an anonymous investigative piece. The article alleged that Liam's sales management software contained malware designed to secretly harvest retail customer data to sell to third parties. The evidence presented was cleverly edited snippets of source code that grossly misrepresented the system's encryption algorithms. The media fallout was explosive. Our company's stock, trading on the OTC market, plummeted. Within 2 hours, billions in market capitalization vanished. A flood of partners in negotiation called to pull their funding. The corporation was in a full-blown crisis. A hardware company cutting off supply at the exact same time a coordinated smear campaign hits the press was clearly a well-orchestrated attack by competitors. At 1 p.m., the board of directors convened an emergency meeting. The 15 largest shareholders filled the Oval Conference table. The tension was palpable. The CFO, wiping sweat from his brow, reported on the dire cash flow situation as banks simultaneously froze our lines of credit. 2 of the older board members shot to their feet, pointing fingers at Liam. They vehemently criticized the freemium strategy, blaming it for the capital drain. They demanded Liam's immediate removal as CEO to calm the market, and proposed bringing in another tech company to acquire a controlling stake and salvage the situation. The company they nominated was none other than Apex Innovations, the very rival that had planted the defamatory news story. I sat at the end of the table in my project manager seat, quickly taking notes, connecting the dots from Chloe's humiliation at the auction to her father cutting off our server supply. I pieced together the entire overthrow plot. The Vanderbilt family had joined forces with Apex to drive our stock price to rock bottom, enabling a hostile takeover. Liam sat at the head of the table, his hands pressed flat against the surface. He remained calm, trying to use technical data to prove the software's source code was clean, and proposing a plan to negotiate with overseas server suppliers. But the shareholders, panicked by their losses, refused to listen. Shouting and table-pounding filled the room. They issued an ultimatum. If Liam couldn't resolve the $20 million debt to Vanderbilt and secure new funding for the project by the morning meeting tomorrow, he would be forced to resign and hand over control. The meeting ended in a deadlock. The shareholders left in a huff. Liam remained alone in the empty conference room, staring at the downward plunging stock chart on the projector screen. The career he had painstakingly built was on the verge of total collapse due to dirty business tactics. I packed up my laptop, walked to the door, and looked back at Liam. The current pressure was beyond what a lone CEO could handle, with all avenues for capital raising blocked by his rivals. I left the room, went straight to my desk, and opened the secondary safe. I took out the backup phone that had been powered off for 3 years. Inserting a SIM card, I dialed a number saved in its memory. The phone rang 3 times. On the other end, the deep, warm voice of the chairman of one of the country's largest real estate and finance conglomerates answered. My time of proving myself was over. It was time to use the true financial power of my family. The phone pressed to my ear carried the calm voice of Arthur Sinclair, chairman of Sinclair Holdings. I identified myself directly, informing him that the 3-year trial period had ended 2 months ahead of schedule. I requested an emergency financial intervention, $20 million in cash to clear the current liabilities, and $500 million to acquire all floating shares of the tech corporation run by Liam Sterling. On the other end of the line, Arthur Sinclair expressed no surprise. He agreed to the immediate disbursement on one condition. I had to return and assume the position of Executive Vice President of Investments at the family conglomerate, putting a permanent end to this game of playing the poor student. I nodded, confirming the deal. An email with bank account details was sent directly to the chairman's private secretary. The massive capital flow was set in motion. Hanging up, I opened my laptop and used a high-level secure VPN to access the corporate intelligence database of Sinclair Holdings. Vanderbilt Hardware Solutions, Chloe's father's company, had been a minor subcontractor for my family's real estate projects 5 years ago. I typed Vanderbilt's tax ID into the search bar and requested the system to pull all their customs declaration records from 2021 to the present. Data spreadsheets filled the screen. I cross-referenced the number of imported server chassis with the number of declared electronic chips. A huge discrepancy quickly emerged. Vanderbilt Hardware had been smuggling thousands of used electronic components, rebranding them as new to sell to tech partners at a premium, while evading an estimated $50 million in corporate income tax. I connected to the printer and printed all 50 pages of bank statements, customs forms, and illicit inventory records. Placing the documents in a red binder, I locked it securely in the secondary safe. The clock showed 2 a.m. when the front door of the penthouse clicked open. Liam came in, his suit disheveled, his tie loosened. He smelled of strong coffee and was visibly exhausted. He collapsed onto the sofa and dialed a credit fund director in Singapore, trying to negotiate a loan against his personal assets. The answer from the other end quickly extinguished his last glimmer of hope. Apex Innovations had blocked all his avenues of credit. I stood leaning against my bedroom doorframe, watching Liam's solitary struggle. I offered no words of encouragement. In the world of business, verbal comfort is worthless in the face of a balance sheet deep in the red. I turned, went into my room, locked the door, and set my alarm for 6 a.m. The counterattack was planned, step by step. Tomorrow morning, the board's deadline would expire. The hostile takeover of the Vanderbilt Apex Alliance needed to be executed right there at the shareholders' meeting to achieve maximum media impact. The next morning, I chose a navy blue pantsuit, my hair pulled back in a high, neat bun. I carried a black briefcase, the red binder secured in its locked compartment. Liam had already left for the office to prepare his defense. Alex arrived to pick me up at 7:30 a.m. sharp. The car sped through the city, joining the heavy morning traffic towards the corporate headquarters. I sent a short text to my father's secretary, confirming the time and place of his appearance. All the chess pieces were in position. The Vanderbilt Apex Alliance was about to face a financial power far beyond their imagination. At precisely 9 a.m., the extraordinary board meeting began. All 15 shareholders were present. On the left side of the oval table sat 2 uninvited guests. Mr. Vanderbilt, Chloe's father, in his capacity as the largest creditor, and a man in a gray suit representing Apex Innovations, the rival who had spread the defamatory rumors. Mr. Vanderbilt sat with his legs crossed, feigning a look of regret. He sighed, pushed a debt notice across the table to Liam, and in a soft but coercive tone, advised Liam to accept the buyout to avoid Vanderbilt having to file for bankruptcy proceedings. The Apex representative immediately followed up, presenting a takeover contract. He offered to buy 51% of Liam's corporation for a paltry sum, just 1/3 of its book value, in exchange for an immediate capital injection to clear the debts. Liam sat at the head of the table, his hands clenched into fists. He steadfastly refused to sign away his life's work for pennies on the dollar. The older shareholders erupted. Citing company bylaws, they demanded an immediate vote to remove Liam as CEO to clear the path for the Apex acquisition. The vote was swift. The motion to oust him quickly surpassed the 60% threshold. Mr. H. Exposition. Vanderbilt smiled smugly, preparing to pack his documents. At that exact moment, the CFO's laptop on the table emitted a loud red alert. He scrambled to open the screen, his eyes widening as he stammered incoherently. The CFO switched on his microphone and announced in a trembling voice. The corporation's bank account had just received a wire transfer of $700 million. The transaction memo read, "Payment for acquisition of all outstanding market shares and strategic investment capital advance." This colossal sum was enough to pay off Mr. Vanderbilt's debt 35 times over. The entire room fell silent. The shouts for removal died out. The Apex representative froze, fumbling for his phone to check the stock market fluctuations. The grand oak doors of the conference room suddenly swung open. 4 bodyguards in black suits entered, quickly flanking the entrance to form a clear path. Arthur Sinclair, the most powerful real estate tycoon in the country, strode in with an air of absolute authority. Following him was the top legal team from Sinclair Holdings. The shareholders scrambled to their feet, bowing their heads in deference to the unexpected guest. Mr. Vanderbilt went pale and tried to offer a handshake, but Arthur Sinclair ignored him completely. He walked straight to the end of the oval table where I was sitting and taking notes. My father stopped in front of me and gave a slight nod. In a deep, steady voice, he announced clearly for the entire room to hear, "The trial period is over. It's time to come home, daughter." The chairman's declaration hit everyone in the room like an earthquake. Arthur turned to Liam and formally announced that the Sinclair Holdings Investment Fund was now the majority shareholder, holding controlling interest in this corporation. He appointed me, his sole legal heir, as the representative of their capital investment. All eyes turned to me. The facade of the poor part-time student, the struggling waitress, was ripped away completely. Liam stood frozen, his astonished gaze shifting from my father to me. He was finally piecing together the illogical points of my academic history and my confidence in international negotiations. Mr. Vanderbilt's legs were shaking so badly he had to grip the back of a chair to stay upright. His attempt to strong-arm and take over the company had inadvertently provoked the dynastic power standing behind me. The corporate chessboard had just been flipped in less than 10 minutes. Before Mr. Vanderbilt could recover, I stood up, took my black briefcase, and walked to the presentation podium. I unzipped the locked compartment and pulled out the red binder. I threw it onto the table right in front of him. The sound of the thick file hitting the glass was sharp and final. I pointed directly at Mr. Vanderbilt and, in a steely voice, listed the specific customs declaration numbers, the amount of evaded taxes, and the scheme of smuggling junk components by Vanderbilt Hardware. I announced that all this legal evidence had already been sent by the Sinclair legal team directly to the IRS's Criminal Investigation Division. Through the influence of Sinclair Holdings, Vanderbilt's suppliers and creditors had already been notified and had begun freezing his lines of credit this morning. Hearing this, Mr. Vanderbilt collapsed into his chair. His self-righteous facade vanished. He opened his mouth to protest, but no sound came out. The sudden severing of his credit network meant his company would be dead long before the authorities could even intervene. The Apex representative, seeing the tide turn, stealthily gathered his papers and slipped out the door. The same shareholders who had been screaming for Liam's removal moments ago were now applauding, enthusiastically supporting the new development direction under the patronage of Sinclair Holdings. The meeting concluded with Liam secure in his position as CEO and a resolution passed to permanently remove Vanderbilt Hardware from the project's supply chain. 2 bodyguards escorted a catatonic Mr. Vanderbilt from the room. That afternoon, news of the federal investigation into the chairman of Vanderbilt Hardware flooded the media. The company's stock value was wiped out. Chloe's family faced the seizure of their assets to cover the damages. At 4 p.m., my personal phone rang. It was Eleanor Sterling, Liam's mother. Her tone was no longer condescending or arrogant. She requested a private meeting at the same French restaurant. I agreed and had my private driver take me. The restaurant was as quiet as before. Eleanor was at the same table, but her demeanor had done a 180-degree turn. Seeing me enter, she stood up and greeted me with a respectful bow. She pushed the menu aside and offered a direct apology. She admitted her mistake in judging a person by their uniform and handbag. She recalled the etiquette test, acknowledging her own short-sightedness in trying to challenge someone from one of the country's most elite families. I sat up straight, calmly accepting her apology. I replied in a measured but firm tone, stating that a person's true value lies in their ability to handle crises and their strategic thinking, not in the arrangement of silverware or the superficiality of a family name. I advised her to respect Liam's business decisions instead of interfering with outdated notions of marriage alliances. Eleanor nodded repeatedly, not daring to argue. The meeting was brief. I stood, paid the bill, and walked out, leaving Liam's mother to her bewilderment and regret. At 7 p.m., I returned to the penthouse. The first thing I did was pull my canvas suitcase from under the bed and pack my few business outfits and personal items. I placed the key card and the note with the safe password on the glass table. Opening my banking app, I transferred exactly $500,000 back into Liam's personal account. The contract fee and the money for Maria's surgery were repaid in full. I took the handwritten fake girlfriend contract from my briefcase, tore it in half, and placed the pieces next to the key card. The front door opened. Liam walked in, shrugging off his suit jacket and tossing it onto the sofa. When he saw the suitcase and the items on the table, he stopped short. I stood facing him and got straight to the point. I announced that the fake girlfriend contract was officially terminated. The threat from the Vanderbilt family was eliminated. His corporation had secured its funding. There was no longer any reason to continue the charade. Liam frowned and took a step forward, about to protest. He tried to bring up our synergy at work and the support we'd given each other. I held up a hand to cut him off. I stated that a real relationship could not be built on the foundation of a deceitful financial transaction. Everything needed to end cleanly to restore balance for both of us. I picked up my suitcase, walked past him, and went straight to the elevator. The doors closed, cutting off the complex look in the CEO's eyes. I returned to my family's estate, officially taking my seat as the Executive Vice President of Technology Investments. 2 weeks passed in a blur of high-intensity work as I reviewed portfolios for acquiring software startups. On a Friday morning, I was in my office on the 30th floor of Sinclair Tower, looking over the technical blueprints for a new data center project. My private secretary knocked and entered, reporting that a special guest was requesting a direct audience with Chairman Sinclair. The security camera feed appeared on my computer screen. It was Liam, dressed in a perfectly tailored, bespoke suit, holding a thick file, walking directly toward my father's office at the end of the hall. His formal appearance at our headquarters piqued my interest. I folded the blueprints, left my office, and followed him. When I pushed open the door to the chairman's office, Liam was standing tall before my father's desk. He placed a proposal for a joint AI development venture on the table, clearly outlining the profit-sharing terms. But that wasn't his primary purpose. Liam looked my father directly in the eye and, in a steady voice, formally asked for permission to pursue me. He declared that all previous fake contracts were void. He was here now as a man who wanted to win the woman he respected through his own merit. My father didn't answer immediately. He turned to look at me, standing in the doorway. Liam turned as well, his eyes meeting mine. There was no longer the calculation of a businessman, only sincerity. The offer to start over, fresh and real, was made openly, transparently, and with complete respect. I looked at him, a small smile touching my lips, and nodded, accepting a new game where the rules would be decided by both of us.